You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line, not the men and women who hold up their honor with distinction. But if there's a lack of a winning strategy, they're in harm's way. Their leaders have failed them. And that's what's happening. We have political leadership. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership?
We have leadership.
When will you show leadership?
Why don't you show some leadership and stand up to your fellow Democrats who won't fund the troops?
So that was fun. Earlier this week, Secretary of War, as he likes to call himself, Pete Hegseth, really got into it with Democratic Senator Gary Peters after Hegseth's leadership was called into question. The leadership is what Hegseth's leadership is what got our servicemen and women killed. He is testifying there, or he's there appealing to Congress, asking for even more money to do war stuff. Right? And then they're like, you're not even good at war stuff, so why would we give you more money? So I do want to play another part from their exchange, because Pete Hegseth seems to take Peters' comments very personally, probably because it was personal. He called him a failure. He said he was a failure as a leader. But the reality is that a lot of this is performative. So let's watch.
The Strait of Hormuz is still closed, reminding everybody it was open before the war. Prices were lower for everybody until the war, and it still remains closed. And of course, tragically, people, service members, our war fighters, who we care deeply about, are still dying. So what's different? Mr. Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth.
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Secretary Hegseth, if you listen to my comments, you would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. And the word I heard exactly what you said.
I will tell you how I use the word failure, because I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure.
All right, so as fun as it was to watch someone call Pete Hegseth a failure to his face multiple times and then clarify, no, I was calling you a failure. Why do we say that this is performative? Because of this. Let's check out this headline from the New York Times. It says the number of US troop deaths suddenly appears lower on the Pentagon website. So they're lying to us. It says 3 military officials and a Pentagon spokesman gave conflicting explanations for why the number of Americans killed in the Iran war had changed. And even some Republicans like Thomas Massie think this has officially gone way too far. Jackson, I do want to get your thoughts on this real quick before we jump into the next part of this article and the reactions that all of this has garnered. But what did you think about that exchange between the senator and Pete Hegseth?
Well, honestly, that was one of the worst exchanges that I've seen anybody in the Trump administration make thus far in any type of hearing, which it's saying a lot because they've all been bad. You know, we watched what's the FBI dude's name, Kash Patel. We watched his disaster hearing, Pam Bondi, and Pete Hegseth has had hearings as well. But you know, this is, I think, just pretty enigmatic of how much everything really is falling apart. Like, on the one hand, Pete Hegseth, because he works for Donald Trump, he has to say we're winning. He has to deflect. He has to do that. But he has to also know that we're not in good straits in this situation. You know, he goes in front of Congress and says, you know, don't ask me questions, just give me billions of dollars more. In addition to the $1.5 trillion. Kirsten Gillibrand, we didn't play this, but you know, part of her questioning was Americans are struggling to afford their groceries, pay their utilities, and you're asking for all this more money for a war that we don't want, and you're not even really telling us what you're gonna do with it. You know, real quick, I think one of the funniest notions to me is when Trump tries to insinuate that the Democratic Party doesn't fund the US military. Doesn't matter who's in office, the military gets funded. The Pentagon has failed, what, 6 audits? Because they just have all the money in the world and they're doing what they want with it. Like, how are we running out of munitions? How are we running out of munitions when we have the greatest funded military in history many times over by far? Because people are just taking the money and making deals and doing what they want with it. So this whole system is just a complete disaster, and that's a full reflection of it.
Yeah, and you have to talk about the audacity of Hegseth in that exchange there, because he was literally there asking them for even more money for his military, for his Pentagon, for whatever's going on in Iran. He went there begging for money, and they said, well, what have you done with the money that we've already given you? You already have so much money. What have you done with it? And he was unable to answer all those questions. And then when he was really called to put to task on it, he was like, you know what, you're a bad leader, you're bad at your job because you don't want to support the troops. That stuff doesn't work anymore. You can't call upon your patriotism and like your nationalism when you're asking for like $500 million or something like that. I don't remember how much it was, but it was a lot of money that he wants. And how are you so defiant? If you're asking anybody for money, is that usually the tone that you take with them? Do you usually call them a failure, tell them they're bad at their job, tell them that they're bad patriots, and then be like, now give me millions and millions and millions of dollars? Like that, it doesn't make any sense. The thing is, like, he tends to just get what he wants anyway, because Donald Trump is the one who wants this war to continue. He's the one who wants to continue to do whatever it is that they are doing over there, whatever it is that they need all these hundreds of millions of dollars more to do. So we'll see if anything actually comes of this, but it's not looking good. And then also the fact that they are changing the numbers on the website. Like, we can't trust anything that comes from this government, okay? So on that note, on Wednesday, the Pentagon reported on its official casualty website that 18 American soldiers were killed during the war in Iran. However, on Thursday, the number was lowered to 14. Okay, so I don't know how that happens. I don't know how people just come back to life. It's really sad that this is what's happening. There's no respect for the dead, especially not for these veterans, okay? So this is from the New York Times. It says 3 military officials said that one reason behind the change was that the Trump administration decided to remove 4 service members killed this past weekend from the list, 3 in Jordan and 1 in northern Iraq, because their deaths occurred after President Trump declared a ceasefire in the war in April. And you can see here the 4 soldiers who were removed from left to right. On the top row, you have First Lieutenant Tyler James Feehan, who was 25 years old, Sergeant Michael Emmanuel Swinton, who was 30 years old. At the bottom, you have Sergeant Angel Rampersad, who is 28 years old, and Private Isabella Gonzalez, who is just 19 years old. And yeah, their lives don't count, I guess. And according to the Pentagon's acting press secretary, Joel Valdez, this is just an error caused by temporary data disruptions on the website. It's always something like that, but people are not stupid, okay? And a lot of people are calling out Hegseth for this. Here is one from former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She posted to X, she said, the Department of War is not counting these American service members' deaths in the official tally of dead US soldiers from Trump's war against Iran, because they claim they were killed after Trump signed the MOU, even though we are bombing every day. This is repulsive. And Thomas Massie, he also had some thoughts on this. He said, let me explain this absurd ruse. The Pentagon is pretending there have been 2 Iran wars separated by a brief ceasefire. The reality is that by going more than 90 days without congressional authorization, the Secretary of War is breaking the law and must be held accountable. So the House did pass the War Powers Resolution for a second time yesterday, and the vote was 214 to 208, but it did fail 47 to 49 in the Senate. And as if that wasn't bad enough, here is how Trump honors these great soldiers. Let's take a look at this. He posted this to Truth Social. He said, these are the real facts, report them. And like, what even is this? This is ridiculous. Like it's just like a weird bar graph, as if like it doesn't say anything, it doesn't mean anything. And this really is not the flex that Donald Trump thinks that it is. Because remember, both Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, this is according to from the New York Times, says they have both repeatedly said that their predecessors, President Biden, as well as Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin III, as well as Vice President Kamala Harris, was personally responsible for the deaths of 13 American service members in a suicide attack in Kabul in 2021. Also in 2024, Trump told Lex Friedman that these people should not have died. They died because of Biden and because of Kamala. They died just like if they pulled the trigger. That's an insane thing for him to say, especially in 2024, when he had already been the president. He knows how these things work, and he was trying to become the president again, okay? It's a very strange spin for him to put on that, because like, obviously that's gonna come back up, but he doesn't care about things like that, because he does things, he says things, he contradicts it, and his people, his supporters don't even notice. They don't see it, they don't care, they don't check, they don't check the hypocrisy of any of it. So how is this any different though? Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, they refuse to accept the reality of this actual war. They refuse to look at it. They're fudging the numbers. They're trying to make themselves look better, which is really despicable. This is a war. This is not a conflict like they keep trying to tell us it is. They just don't have authorization for it. This is an illegal war that we are in, and they're really just not being honest about anything that is actually happening in Iran, or really in the Middle East in general. We don't know what's going on. We know that people have ulterior motives, that they're doing things for one reason, but they're telling us a different reason. And that's why the messaging is so all over the place, because the messaging is lies. And you know how hard it is to maintain a lie. The problem with this administration is that they usually don't go out of their way to maintain their lies. They just say one thing, they say something else, and if it contradicts, who cares? Not their supporters, so they don't care. What are your thoughts, Jackson?
Donald Trump is so lucky that his supporters are as stupid as he is. And the supporters he has left, because there have been a decent amount of people who have left him. But at this point, if you're still with him, I mean, Donald Trump, like he posts this picture, this graph where he thinks that this absolves him from the fact that he shouldn't have been in the Iran war in the first place. He treats it like it's some like petty interpersonal conflict that only impacts him. Like he's arguing with one of his little girlfriends or something. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like I didn't talk to you for one day. It could have been 3. Like people are dead, like, and not only are people dead, but this has implications for the way the entire world socioeconomic fabric exists at all. The world is changing because of what Donald Trump has done. And he's too stupid to realize that. He does all these things to try to get himself out of trouble, but really he's just trying to convince himself that he's everything that he says he is, because we know he's not. I mean, yeah, there's some people in the country who will ride or die for him no matter what, but everybody else sees through it. So it's just interesting how the whole world has to go through hell for the personal insecurities of a few men throughout history. People like Donald Trump, people like Adolf Hitler, like individuals who were stewing in personal insecurity, and they made a whole political movement out of it that crashed and burned because there's no foundation other than rage and insecurity. That's it.
Yeah, that's such a great point too, because if you study history at all, that really is just what a lot of what it is. It's just like insecure men, usually, most of the time, 99% of the time, insecure men who are mad about something. And so then they make it everyone else's problem. Like look at even Stephen Miller, like he's not up there with all these people, but he would like to be, he would like to have a significant impact on the world, on the American people, on whoever, just because like some brown girl in high school didn't want to go out with him. Like that's why we're all dealing with this. That's why
it really stems from stuff like that.
Yeah, it does, and it's so telling and it's so frustrating because we don't have any recourse to that. Go to therapy, I guess, but like, is that going to help us right now? Probably not. We you know what? I'm not going to get into what I was going to mention, but it is very frustrating to see all this and the fact that they're so bold and so emboldened by the Trump administration to just do whatever they want. All of this was very, very meticulously planned. This has been going on for a very long time, and this is kind of the apex of everything that they've been doing behind the scenes at the local levels, at the state levels, at the various different branches of government. All of that, it was to consolidate power so that now, not just the American people are without power to do anything about this. Even our protests seem to fall on deaf ears, even though we've had the largest protests, some of the largest protests in our country's history. But even in Congress, a lot of our Congress people have just been made completely useless, right? You have people like Cory Booker coming out being like, this is crazy. I know it's crazy. We all know it's crazy, but you're the one who's in Congress. You're supposed to be doing something about it. And to be fair, the Democrat, they have passed their War Powers Resolution Act twice now in the House. It doesn't make a difference though. Donald Trump just kind of ignores it and he just does whatever he wants to do anyway, especially this time it failed in the Senate. So like it's not going anywhere. So we are very frustrated. We're running out of options and we would like to do something about this. But what that course of action looks like right now is unclear. So
every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.